All right, folks, we'll be getting started here shortly. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome, folks. This is Founder Leroon with Lady Shell, and we're going to be talking about Fantasy Grounds Unity Beta. So, this is basically an early release, early access version. So,